The morning was ordinary, but to Mike, everything about it held a peculiar tinge. The way his coffee rippled in the cup, the song of the morning lark from outside, even the glow of the rising sun felt unsettling, uncanny. It was as if reality was distorting, bending, preparing him for an extraordinary ordeal. He was a city man through and through, the sort who took the elevator to his fifth-floor office because stairs were too rustic. But today, he was about to embark on a journey through the dense woods of Black Pines Wilderness, utterly alien to his concrete comfort. The woods had always been there, vast and mysterious at the edge of town, but he had never ventured. It was a sudden compulsion, an uncanny urge to experience nature at its rawest. Equipped with a hiking backpack borrowed from a friend, filled with food, a map, a compass, a flashlight, and an unsettling adrenaline, Mike began his journey. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the city's clamor diminished into an eerie silence, a quiet so profound it was almost deafening. Everything here felt ancient, untamed, beautiful yet threatening. The wilderness swallowed him whole, the dense trees closing in, their twisted branches appearing like gnarled hands reaching out for him. His heart pounded, the forest whisper and rustle turning into murmurs in his mind. Every unknown sound, every movement in the peripheral of his vision sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through his veins. The second day brought an unsettling discovery. A desolate campsite, the remnant of a fire pit still warm. Around it were strewn scattered belongings, a bent canteen, a torn sleeping bag, and a bloody shirt that sent a chilling sensation down his spine. The most disturbing find, however, was a torn piece of cloth that held 4 distinct gashes, gashes that could only have been made by the claws of a large animal, most likely a bear. A sense of dread seeped into Mike's being, soaking into his thoughts, clawing at his sanity. Every sound now amplified his fear. The night brought with it 1,000 unseen horrors, each creak of the branch, every rustling leaf a portent of the beast lurking nearby. His dreams were plagued by nightmarish visions of a monstrous creature with bloodshot eyes, its growls reverberating in the chilling silence. On the third day, the forest came alive with a dreadful roar. It was close, too close. The growl echoed through the woods, a brutal declaration of the beast's presence. Mike froze. He was not alone. He knew he should turn back, leave this cursed wilderness behind, but he was hopelessly lost, his compass useless in the dense forest, the once familiar trail now a convoluted labyrinth of towering trees and undergrowth. The beast haunted him, its presence a pervasive menace. He could smell its rancid breath, see the mutilated bushes where it had passed, and hear its savage snarls. The thought of becoming its prey sent shivers down his spine, igniting an almost paralyzing fear within him. As night fell, Mike found himself cornered, the beast closing in. The brush rustled, and then he saw it, an enormous bear, its eyes burning with a terrifying hunger. Mike's heart pounded against his ribs as he remembered the flare gun in his backpack. He had only one shot, one chance to survive. With trembling hands he fired. The forest was briefly lit in an infernal red, the monstrous bear recoiling from the sudden burst of light. But the flare, instead of scaring the beast away, seemed to enrage it further. It roared, a dreadful sound that echoed throughout the forest, and lunged at Mike. In that terrifying instant, he felt the ground give way beneath him. He was falling into darkness. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his body as his world faded to black. When he awoke, he was surrounded by concerned faces, flashing lights, and the sound of radios. He had fallen into a deep pit, apparently used by the local forest rangers to capture and relocate dangerous wildlife. A trap intended for the bear, his accidental fall had saved him from a gruesome fate. The bear, frightened by the commotion, had fled, leaving Mike battered but alive. The ordeal had changed Mike. No longer was he the city man who took the elevator. The wilderness had shown him his deepest fears, the untamed terror that lurked just beyond the edge of his safe, concrete world. He had looked into the eyes of death and come back, a tale that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it, a tale of an ordinary man's terrifying encounter with the ferocious beast of the wild. The sun was barely a thin line on the horizon when John Weaver, an archaeologist of some renown, found himself standing on the edge of what he could only describe as an abyss. His team had been digging in the frozen tundra of northern Alaska for months, uncovering remnants of a long-lost civilization. But this yawning chasm was unlike anything they'd discovered before. An unending darkness seemed to stretch into its depths, swallowing the harsh Arctic sunlight without remorse. The sound that came from the depths was the first oddity, a continuous low hum, almost beyond the realm of human hearing. John felt it more than he heard it, the resonance vibrating in his bones. It was a primal, wrong sound, like the earth's marrow was groaning. Even more disturbing was the inexplicable climate around the hole. The ice and snow around it had melted into a soggy mire, giving the hole a 30-foot berth, and despite the freezing Arctic winds, standing near the edge felt like a balmy summer day. Days turned into weeks. Strange incidents started to pile up. Instruments stopped working or gave false readings. Compass needles spun erratically and satellite signals failed. The camp's huskies refused to go anywhere near the site, and their howling filled the still nights with dread. One night, a piercing scream echoed from the chasm. It was Harold, one of the crew members. They found his tent empty, his possessions scattered, and his footprints leading directly into the abyss. John organized a search, but no trace of Harold was found. No body, no blood, nothing. Harold's disappearance marked a turning point. The crew was filled with a pervasive sense of unease, as if they were intruders in a realm not meant for humans. John, however, was relentless. He couldn't let go. The mystery of the abyss was a siren's call to his curiosity. A week later, something else emerged from the depths. It wasn't a sound, but a force, a pressure. The very air seemed to thicken, becoming viscous and tangible, pulsating with an invisible rhythm. It was like the abyss was breathing. That same night, the fallen Harold returned. He stumbled into the camp, his eyes vacant, his lips muttering strange, incoherent syllables. His skin was horribly burnt, as if exposed to extreme heat. He wasn't the Harold they knew, but a hollow shell. The core, he kept repeating, like a broken record. That night, he died in his sleep, a peaceful expression on his face, as if he had found some profound relief in death. John finally decided to descend into the chasm. Rigged with climbing gear and armed with lights, he rappelled into the hole, a wireless camera broadcasting his descent to the terrified crew above. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the darkness became, and the stronger the strange hum. Hours passed. The abyss seemed to have no end. Then, abruptly, the line went slack. The crew on the surface watched in horror as the camera feed showed John looking at something in front of him, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. There, in the inky depths of the earth, illuminated by his shaky flashlight, was a gigantic, pulsating heart. It was entwined with veins and arteries that burrowed into the surrounding earth, its surface glossy and slick. With each beat, it sent waves of intense heat, the source of the strange climate. It was alive, connected to the earth, a grotesque mockery of life as they knew it. What have we done? John's voice was a whisper, filled with dread. As John's voice faded into the depths, the heart responded with a thunderous beat that reverberated through the chasm. The crew members on the surface clutched their ears in agony, feeling as if their very skulls were being crushed under the weight of the sound. The heart's pulsations intensified, its rhythm quickening, and the ground shook violently. Cracks spread like spider webs across the frozen landscape, swallowing tents and equipment whole. Panic gripped the remaining crew members as they scrambled to escape the crumbling campsite. Meanwhile, John found himself drawn closer to the colossal heart, unable to tear his eyes away from its mesmerizing yet horrifying presence. The heat emanating from it was oppressive, scorching his skin and searing his lungs with each breath. As he reached out a trembling hand to touch the pulsating organ, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice filled with ancient malevolence and seductive power. It whispered promises of unimaginable knowledge, untold secrets of the universe, and the chance to reshape reality itself. But there was a price, a terrible price that would forever alter his existence. Overwhelmed by the allure of the forbidden, John hesitated, his rational mind warring with an insidious curiosity. The voice grew more insistent, its tone dripping with malice, coercing him to surrender himself to the heart's dreadful embrace. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows behind John, a woman with wild, disheveled hair and a gaze filled with unyielding determination. It was Sarah, a fellow archaeologist and his closest companion on the expedition. She had managed to descend into the chasm, defying the overwhelming fear that gripped the others. "Spare yourself, John." Sarah's voice cut through the ethereal whispers, her words laden with desperation. "Can't you see? This thing, it's a parasite, a devourer of souls. It promises power, but only brings ruin." John's wavering resolve began to falter as he glimpsed the truth within Sarah's eyes. He withdrew his hand, the connection severed, the heart reacted with a thunderous bellow, its pulsations turning erratic and violent. Sarah grabbed John's arm, pulling him away from the abominable heart and urging him to ascend the rope, back toward the surface. They climbed frantically, each movement fraught with the overwhelming sense that they were being pursued by an unseen malevolence. As they neared the surface, the ground quaked violently, sending shockwaves through the ice and snow. The abyss convulsed, disgorging a horrific monstrosity, a grotesque amalgamation of sinew, bone, and pulsating flesh. Its many-eyed visage glowed with an otherworldly radiance, and its tentacle-like appendages thrashed violently, seeking prey. Sarah and John reached the surface just as the abomination breached the icy barrier. They stumbled backward, gasping for breath, their eyes widening in horror at the sight before them. The creature let out an unholy screech, piercing their eardrums and causing the surrounding landscape to crack and crumble. Then, with an unexpected burst of energy, the creature imploded, its form disintegrating into a cloud of black mist. The shockwave from its demise knocked John and Sarah off their feet, but they emerged relatively unscathed. Breathing heavily, the two survivors watched as the chasm closed before them, sealing away the heart and the unspeakable horrors it represented. They were left with only a desolate, scarred landscape as a haunting reminder of the darkness they had narrowly escaped. But as John and Sarah looked at each other, a realization dawned. The heart was not destroyed. It was merely contained, biding its time in the depths of the earth, waiting for another opportunity to ensnare unsuspecting souls. The pounding of rain against the roof echoed through the house, competing with the booming rolls of thunder. A kaleidoscope of light, like frozen lightning, cast eerie shadows across the room. I was alone, 16 years old, and my first time in this quiet, almost painfully suburban house without my parents. I hated thunderstorms, but tonight, the thrumming rain felt like a comforting blanket, muffling the rest of the world from me. Or so I thought. An hour into the storm, nestled in the comforting crevices of a worn-out couch, engrossed in an old novel, I heard it, a scraping sound, like nails dragging across the wooden siding of the house. I froze, listening. Maybe it was just a tree branch in the wind, I told myself. The wind and the storm could play odd tricks on your ears. But then it came again, a gnashing, grinding noise, louder this time, followed by a muffled thump, as though something or someone had thrown their weight against the door. A primal, icy fear crawled up my spine, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, matching the rhythm of the storm outside. Taking a deep breath, I tiptoed to the front window and peered through the slit in the blinds. It was almost impossible to make out anything in the rain-drenched darkness, save for an occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the yard in stark white light. The next peal of thunder shook the house and me with it. My breath hitched as my eyes caught a shadow, something formless and dark, huddled by the door. There was someone there, scrabbling at the doorknob, pushing against the door in rhythmic thuds. My heart pounded with a mix of terror and adrenaline. I was alone, without any immediate help. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but just as I unlocked it, the lights flickered and went out. The storm had claimed the electricity. My fear escalated, the darkness of the house swallowing me up. The only illumination was the sporadic, ghostly glow from the storm outside. Emotions churned within me, fear, horror, and a rising paranoia. Each sound was magnified. The crack of thunder, the creaking of the house, the splatter of rain against the window, and overall, the relentless, sickening scrapes and thuds at the door. The intruder was persistent. Gulping back tears, I dialed 911. A dispassionate voice answered, promising help would come. But with the storm, it could take time. Time I wasn't sure I had. After what felt like hours, the assault on the door stopped. An eerie silence filled the house, only broken by the distant murmur of the storm. I didn't dare to breathe. I felt hunted, watched, an uneasiness pricking at my senses. Then a guttural growl echoed from the back of the house. The intruder had moved to the back door. Suddenly, the front door burst open, the wind and rain howling through the entryway. I screamed, running towards the back of the house, away from the open door. But I skidded to a stop as the back door, too, creaked open, revealing nothing but the stormy night beyond. I was trapped. Tears streamed down my face, blending with the cold sweat beading on my forehead. Suddenly, two beams of light flooded through the front door. I heard the blare of a siren, and my knees buckled in relief. The police were here. I raced towards the front door, the rain whipping my face as I staggered outside. A figure stepped out of the police car, but it was not an officer. It was my neighbor, Mr. Harris, a sheepish look on his face. "I'm sorry, kid," he stammered. "I had one too many drinks, thought this was my house."